Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Salute Ukraine. I'm Lily.
I'm Chris.
How have you been?
Hey, I've had a long week, but I'm happy to be here. How have you?
I've been good. Are you ready for some Russian disinformation and propaganda?
Of course. Feed it to me so I can barf it up.
Okay, you're ready to be Z?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions just to get like a baseline?
No.
Okay. Is Ukraine attacking Russia with war mosquitoes?
I would think not.
You're right. Okay. Okay, let's jump in. So here we have a horror story about a Russian family that's leaving and going to New York, and they're on the plane. So let's take a look and react.
Of course.
Как я давно хотел это сделать.
В Америку летите?
Да, переезжаем.
Америка самая свободная страна. Страна возможностей.
А вы с мужем летите?
Да, мы вместе. Он сейчас подойдет. А вот и мой муж. Знакомьтесь.
Эмили.
Простите.
I think I'm honestly, when I first saw this clip, I was speechless, and I'm still slightly speechless because one of the music in the background is very like romantic comedy hijinks type of vibe, and then they have this like they set up this, I don't know, this scene where that is not what I thought was going to happen, which I guess is good to engage the audience, but that's not the way that I want to be engaged with. But also, they're just like anti-LGBTQ plus, like mocking people of possible different genders, but also like making it overblowing. It is just, I'm having a hard time articulating how confused I am and how offended I am.
There, because like that could have been a good like lesbian romantic comedy.
Yes.
They were onto something.
Yeah.
It went sideways.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep watching.
Пассажиры позади вас вегетарианцы. Им неприятно, что при них употребляют мясо.
Мы же их не заставляем это.
Простите, но в США принято придерживаться принципов демократии. Позвольте, я это заберу.
Парень, тут очередь в туалет.
What do you want?
В очередь, говорю, вставь в туалет.
I want to go to the toilet.
Простите, мистер, что случилось?
Да вот парень без очереди лезет тут.
И что? Вы не хотите его пропустить?
Я?
Конечно. Его надо пропустить. Мы подождем.
Его народ долгие годы терпел притеснение белых. Мы перед всеми афроамериканцами в долгу. Простите нас, сэр.
Прошу вас.
Furious. This poor African man. All I kept thinking about was like this poor African man who was probably paid whatever amount of rubles to show up in this and to like say a couple of English words. And obviously English is not his first language, and maybe Russian is not his first language either. So he's just like in this. I'm not sure if he was informed about how this footage would be used.
I thought he was in an airline commercial, I bet.
Yeah. Or even like in a comedy, like a real comedy, not like a propagandized comedy, maybe like a satire of like, I don't know, of like racial like, you know, some of this stuff falls in the line of like, okay, we have like people can make fun of things that happen in society, but this is like very dangerous because it's like not even close to anything that happens in the US. And it's like flipping real life issues that people have, like ability to get on planes without being bothered, which is like a problem that people of color can have in the US, or even like being confronted aggressively. Because even when he was skipping the line, the Russian man wasn't like, "Excuse me, sir, you're skipping, there is a line." He was very aggressive towards the black character. And I was like, wait, this is kind of like a weird inversion. This is just like very weird.
Don't they show the white guy as or the black man as skipping the white man?
Yes, they showed him as skipping the white man, but usually in that scenario, I would imagine that if I'm in a line, right, and somebody goes to skip me, I'm not like, get in the back of the line. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. There are people, this is actually a line. And the person usually, even if they were about to skip, when you say something to them, they're usually like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notice, even though we could tell that they noticed. And they go, and I'm not like, who do you think you are trying to skip? You get what I'm saying? Like, there's this kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm overreading the text.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Like, the kind of like surface level message is, oh, America's crazy woke, you know, look at this madness, vegetarians, you know. What do you think is like the real kind of belief underneath of the real message? Because I don't think Russians know too much about American woke politics.
Yeah.
What does this really reflect?
I think it's trying to say that like American or the West doesn't make any sense in the things that they do, or that like the actual oppressed people are like traditional people who like, I don't know, who adhere to whatever conservative values that they're trying to dog whistle towards, and they're saying that like those people are the real oppressed people of not just in America but of the world, and that essentially democracy oppresses like men or this traditional couple that eats meat and that is straight. It's
interesting.
It's weird.
I read it like a little different.
Okay, tell me.
I read it as like an implicit kind of like white supremacy. Like, you're going to lose your racial status if you leave Russia. And I feel like, you know, Russia doesn't have a lot of black people, so it may not be like the hot topic there, but I think there's this kind of like inner sense. Because like in the 80s, like in the Soviet Union, right? Officially, this is workers' paradise and there's no racism, and, you know, that was the ideology. But then when they had like actual like foreign students and immigrants and workers from Africa and from other countries, there was like massive racism. And East Germany is still like the heart of, you know, racism in Germany. So like, I don't want to like project too much coming from an American perspective onto this, but like, that's what I see. What I see is like, you're going to lose the racial status that you have here or that you think you're entitled to.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think also the definition of traditional like embeds a certain level of white supremacy. And this is basically like the reason why we believe in traditional values is because traditional values are inherently good and are inherently white. And then we have this like couple who's leaving paradise, right? There's like a sense that they're leaving paradise, and as Putin would say, descending into pure Satanism or something along the lines, like, right, the West, borderline Satanists who are gonna make you stop eating meat and let a black man skip in front of you for an airplane bathroom. And I also think like when I first watched this, I kind of laughed at how ridiculous it is, because it's not saying that like if you move to the West you will lose like actual democratic values, right? You can't vote, or you can't like talk to your congressperson or vote people out that you don't like, or participate in free elections. It's basically saying you won't have you can't do petty things. Like, okay, even if I couldn't eat meat on a plane, like I accidentally went on a, I don't know, vegetarian cruise. Like when I got off the plane, I could eat meat. It's not like I'm tied to this. This is a particular situation, but anywhere in the U.S. I can go for the most part. I can.
It shows the Russian as the reasonable, like, liberal guy. He's like, yeah, but he's not eating it. Yeah, I'm eating it. Like, it shows him as the reasonable guy. Like, I'm not the one imposing anything. Cause
oh, yeah.
It sounds like Russia.
That's a great point. That was a great point.
Quote. We're not trying to impose anything on anyone by force. As we send columns of tanks into your country, you know, we're offering.
Yeah, and it's because they're Satanists, guys. It's not because of like petty little things that we don't like, or that we want to invade another nation and take away their sovereignty. It's because we're fighting Satan.
Let's keep watching.
Yes.
Sorry, I just like that cool pose.
Вы не могли бы пересесть в носовую часть самолета?
В смысле, я один?
Нет, вы все трое.
Зачем?
Там сзади пара, они child-free. Дело в том, что ваш сын попадает в поле их зрения, и это вызывает у них дискомфорт.
Okay. Are you more Z, less Z? How you doing?
I feel like because the U.S. is child free, I'm gonna stick with the U.S. But on a serious note, though, you know what I realized? This is a conversation that I've been seeing happen on the internet a lot. This like child free against like traditional like having children debate, which I didn't know where it was coming from. But it seems like it's coming from some type of like weird Russian propaganda feed, because I'm like, this is not like a real conversation I think people have in real life. Like if you decide to not have children, unless like it's with your parents or family members, I've never had a stranger who didn't know me come to me and is like, I'm uncomfortable that you don't have children. And I've never gone up to a random stranger and say that I'm comfortable that you have children. Like this is not a real.
It's also never happened in Russia. It's a country with one of the lowest birth rates in the world.
Wow, I did not know that.
They have like 1.5 children per couple. I mean, there's widespread prostitution in Russia. I mean, this is not the bastion of like conservative values here. I mean, this is like a complete this is Putin's fantasy. People having more kids so he can have more soldiers.
Wow. That's definitely something I wasn't thinking about. See, this is why I'm couched more in my Americanness. I'm like, how dare you like criticize something in America that's never happened? But but you're right. Like when I think of Russian culture, I don't think of conservatism. Maybe militarism is what I think of. Maybe like hardcore patriarchal society. But like patriarchal societies are not usually societies that like have family values, because male dominant. Anyways, I feel like I'm going into a feminist rant. Let me dial it.
No feminist rant.
No feminist.
No, I forget.
But I will say it did have entertainment value, because of the background music that made me think of a 90s rom-com. They should have just gone with the couple at the beginning. Amelie, the husband. I want to know more about them. Yeah.
Well done. That was always entertaining. Let's move right along. All right. So this clip is a compilation from UATV. Be careful. This may be funded by the Ukrainian government.
Wow.
Культурная трансформация Европы идет давно, и у нее, конечно же, есть бытовое измерение. Людей просят реже стирать, меньше пользоваться бытовой техникой, меньше мыться, ограничить температуру в помещении, дома и на работе. А сейчас еще и советуют питаться насекомыми. Еще чуть-чуть, и французская кухня может стать неузнаваемой. Итальянская тоже. Баварская колбаса станет чем-то неприличным, а британский стейк не политкорректным.
That's what I'm like, okay. They're eating bugs, I guess, because they're poor, because they don't have these wonderful Russian meals coming in or something. Politically incorrect.
I don't know.
Like, you can either make the claim that we got all the resources and you're poor, or you can be like, you're all woke libs. Like, you cannot. You're mixing streams here.
And I'm just having a hard time imagining Russians eating steak every day in their commie blocks. But maybe that's just because I don't understand the Great Empire. And I'm just gonna leave it at that.
На это вовсю работает Еврокомиссия, официально разрешая продавать в продовольственных магазинах то, что раньше как пища и не воспринималось. А сейчас, как оказывается, насекомые, жуки и черви – новое слово в кулинарии и новое слово в ресторанном меню.
You know what's interesting? My husband, like, he loves, like, for us to go to these restaurants to actually eat bugs. So I feel like they're coming for me, and I don't, I don't like it. But honestly, like, I don't understand what they mean by, like, these bugs were never considered food. Like, they're cultures. Are Russians not aware that there are cultures who eat bugs as part of, like, delicacies in their culture?
Well, you just asked our Russians aware of their culture already, and
that's true. They're not part of the empire, so they don't exist. Okay, I understand. Or there's Satanists, Westerners who are forcing people to eat bugs. But when you showed this to me, I was reading an NPR article this morning about, like, conservative politicians in Europe, like, are against bug eating, and I just didn't I was like, where would they be getting this idea from, this anxiety from? And when you showed this to me, I was like, oh my God, another instance of Russian propaganda seeping into Western society and making people act absolutely ridiculous.
oh, day I learned. So, like, I think the, like, I don't want to say grain of truth, but, like, the little facts they're bringing into this propaganda is that, like, there were changes to rules in the EU and the US exactly for what you're saying. You can eat bugs. There are cultures that eat insects, and they just kind of wanted to update, rules to be, reasonable to everyone and to have official guidelines on that kind of thing. This is just such a weird, like, that clip they use in the propaganda is so obviously a news segment on, like, cutting edge culinary. Would you eat bugs? I've been watching this since I was a kid. Like, it doesn't show images of poverty. Like, it's obvious what they took this from.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, the Russian population, I don't know, like, it's been declining for a long time. Huge numbers of people have left, Russia and the Soviet Union before that. So I don't think there's too many Russians that don't have immediate friends and relatives in Europe. Mm-hmm. On some level, you know that this is not real.
Yeah.
Like, this is what, like, on some level, I will guarantee that every Russian knows that this is not.
Yeah. I would imagine so, yeah.
So why? Why make these claims that, like, people are freezing to death and eating bugs in Berlin, if it's so obviously false?
And I don't know. And I guess it's also to be able to put out information that's, like, an alternative reality that people have a hard time fighting against. Because it's like, oh, well, I don't believe that people are. But did you watch the news segment where the guy was putting bugs on the food? Are you saying that you didn't see that with your own eyes? And it's like this ability to, like, take something out of its original context and spin it into, like, something that's, one, ridiculous, but also sort of believable. And, to be honest, people are really gullible, because I recently had a conversation with somebody I consider a friend, and they thought that, like, people could mutate with animals. It was very weird. And I was like, oh, so this is how propaganda works, because, like, people do have interesting beliefs, core beliefs that maybe are not interrogated all the time, and with enough propaganda being put out there, all it needs is that, like, that little entry point where you could be like, oh, maybe people in Europe are just eating bugs. Bugs are disgusting. We shouldn't eat them. And then you have, like,
against forcing people to eat bugs. I don't care how many subscribers this costs me. I'm against that.
I mean, I don't know. When we reach 100,000 subscribers, I will eat a plate of crickets, guys. I'm a Westerner, so I won't do anything for attention.
Just stop pretending you haven't already.
That's true.
Oh, this is the RT lady. Let's see.
Okay. Oh my God, her.
Okay, so here, let's hear from the Holy Patriarchal head of the Russian Church.
Yeah.
The ethnic religion of the proud Russian people. I believe we are going to get some moral clarity from Carol.
Let us.
Nice hat.
I was thinking the same thing. He's dripped out for God. Okay, we'll give him that.
которые не сдались никогда ни одному врагу,
Like you.
которые всегда выходили победителями, что их можно в нынешних условиях либо победить, либо, как теперь говорят, переформатировать, то есть навязать им некие ценности, которые даже и ценностями назвать невозможно, для того, чтобы они были как все и подчинялись тем, у кого есть сила контролировать большую часть мира. И вот это желание победить.
Go for it.
When I watch this, I think is Russia parodying its own ideas of the West? Like, does it think that like we actually like millions of people in the West listen to what the Pope says, so it has to have its own Pope to say like count? Like I watched this and I was like, one, I did not know Russian people were super religious. That's not maybe it's a new thing now. Is it a new thing?
I mean, I don't think Russian people are super religious, but as part of this kind of like ethnic Russian supremacist idea there, they wanted a traditional ethnic religion. So they really strengthened the church, and they have like oligarchs donate money. Like all these churches are being built all over Russia and like prime places in the centers of cities. And like officially not from the government, because officially the Russian government's secular.
Yeah.
But really they're hand in hand with the church. They even opened like churches in the FSB, which is like the new KGB. Like this is the state church, okay? Can we just put pretense aside? Like this is the state church of Putin. I don't know that, I wouldn't say it's like a super, super religious place. There's a lot of Christians there, but...
So I don't understand this particular strategy of like a propaganda, but this could be because this is not targeted towards me as like, because I'm not super religious. But I think that like when I'm watching it, I'm like, are they thinking that like we as the West have the Pope, so which is like a bad, like,
I think saying internally focused. I don't think this one's right.
Okay.
This is a little bit, rallying the troops,
Oh, interesting.
I mean, like, you're not religious. I am, sort of, I guess. But, I mean, it's interesting because Carol, like, this position of his of being like a puppet for Putin has cost him a lot. In fact, there's a schism now in Eastern Orthodox Christianity between the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople, who's the like first among equals in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. So there's like a schism now between Constantinople and Moscow, because this had been developing for years. The ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew gave the Ukrainians the right to have an independent church, and this was a few years ago. So there was like this declaration of autocephaly, I think it was called, that basically said the church in Kyiv doesn't answer to Moscow anymore. It can be independent. This caused Kirill to go bananas because he's in bed with the Russian nationalists. So...
okay. And this is saying like Kyiv is the demonic church and he's the one true representation of the one true Russian church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because Ukraine's part of Russia, according to him. So obviously the Ukrainian church is part of the Russian church. I mean, from my perspective, I'm Episcopalian. I mean, this is just for shame. I'm not saying that Christians are, anything to brag about or the most moral people or something, but it's almost like when we cut you off,
Yeah.
At the point that like other Christian churches are like, this is a little weird, you've gone pretty far. I mean, can you be a credible anything? Can you be a credible religious body and endorse the invasion of Ukraine?
I would think not.
This is not like a agree to disagree type thing, So the one thing about like following this Russian disinformation is they make it really hard to find it. Like Google and all them have taken all this criticism for like spreading Russian disinformation. So I'm like looking for propaganda and I cannot find it. But I just hit the jackpot. Check out Russian Media Monitor. That's got the good stuff on YouTube.
Николай Романенко – это здоровый красавец, который читал рэп. Давайте покажем. Но я не могу пройти мимо мешка, извините, я как-то все пытаюсь. Покажем Николая его выступление.
Навеки ваш, Катюшин, солдат советский.
Красавец какой.
So that was a concert at the 1-year anniversary. And that guy sang on the same stage as Putin and said verbatim, "I'm a Soviet soldier." And there's been all these images of like Russian tanks and stuff flying the honest to God Soviet flag. The Wagner Group, there's images of them flying the Russian imperial flag and the Soviet flag. Like, what is going on? Can you help me out with this?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, did he say that they were watching a rap? They were about to watch some...
Yeah, that Russian soldier raps at the 1-year anniversary of the war.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
No, I thought they were going on some like anti-West thing. Yeah. No, the guy was rapping.
And he was rapping about being a Soviet soldier.
Yeah. Let's keep watching.
Это такое модное слово. Экзистенциальная война. Нас пытаются уничтожить. Не в первый раз. И исход будет очевиден. Наше дело правое. Победа будет за нами. Но какие у нас красивые люди. Это, конечно, удивляет. Ну какой же у нас красоты люди.
Other propaganda that we've been watching is, including this, is about like how much Russia does not like the woke West, while also continuously victimizing themselves, basically saying that people are out to destroy them for a war that they started, and a conflict that they keep stringing along for no reason. And it's just very interesting to me, like, other people and other groups are victimizing themselves, but we're the real victims by perpetrating a war. It's just a very interesting take.
Маргарита.
Ой, Володь, тебя послушаешь, и хочется прям вот расслабиться, уехать домой в Сочи и вообще ничего не делать. Дай бог, чтобы ты был прав, дай бог. Девочка.
Can we talk about her fashion for a minute? Because, like, she's like the chief of, like, all trad wives, I think. So, I mean...
It's giving Christmas. It's giving red and green. It's giving lace as well. Is the red supposed to rep... I guess the red is, like, Mother Russia vibes.
President communism again.
I mean,
I'm gonna give her like a C+, B- for effort.
I really like the shoulders. I really like the little puff sleeve. It's cute. I'm not sure why the green eyeshadow, really. That's my biggest question.
It's gone full girl.
Yeah.
So you're saying essentially like it's too bad she's a fascist, but a good shoulder's a good shoulder.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I would imagine Russia is famous for its embroidery lace.
I don't know.
Мы, конечно, вот правда другие. Видели же военнослужащих там женщин, на кого они похожи? А эти сидят чуть ли не в окопах, на передовой, накрашенные, с прическами, вот эти вот челочки, понимаешь, все в форме, просто красавицы. Удивительные. И парень этот, конечно, который рэп читал, Катюша. У меня, когда я вижу такие вещи, и огромный этот стадион, флагами...
This is good. Okay. So it's like when we're invading other countries, we keep it fam.
Yeah. She's like, a beat. Who goes to war without a full beat? Okay, who goes to war without getting their bangs trimmed? When she said, "Did you see our girls?" I thought she meant like, I don't know, women in the sidelines listening to the rap.
I thought they're so virginal and saying babies and.
She's like, no, they are literal bad bitches. Like, quite frankly, they kill people with a full face of makeup on. Something you Ukrainian women could never. Oh my God, that is a very interesting read, an interesting take. I did not
Я
see
не
it
могу
coming.
понять, как могут быть люди, которые против, русские люди. Вот как их не заряжает вот это все гордостью, как они могут не болеть, не переживать за наших ребят, как они могут не быть им благодарны, как они могут не молиться о них каждый день, видя их. Что это за люди вообще, удивительно. Они же есть. Что касается нашей техники...
Interesting that this pundit who's supposed to represent Mother Russia does not fit into some of the categories. Because when I think of Russian women, and I remember one of the propaganda videos that said like we have beautiful women. It was basically like Aryan trad wife woman, like blonde hair, blue eyed, natural in nature vibe. But this woman is actually not that. And it's interesting to me that she's like very dark haired and is wearing this dark makeup. I guess it's supposed to be like more matronly as opposed to like the younger, blonder, sexually fertile Russian woman. And maybe she's supposed to represent another archetype that I don't know anything about. But I do find that visually interesting that the person that they're using to represent like the voice of the women of Russia, I would imagine, is very like, is a darker Russian.
Interesting.
Я очень-очень рада это слышать, потому что мы слышим разные вещи, и мы слышим про этот контрнаступ пресловутый, уже будет он, не будет. Но дай бог, чтобы все относились к этому максимально серьезно. Кто производит эту технику, кто распределяет, кто командует. Вот я хотела бы к ним обратиться и сказать им, что товарищи, мы вспомним советское слово, как парень.
This is my delayed reaction here, but did she say that the strange Russians who oppose the war, she can't believe that they exist? It was almost threatening.
I mean, she's like, how can you not weep when you see the flames full of flags? And it's like...
And then she's like, oh, those weirdos who don't believe in this cause, they still exist? Wow. Interesting. It's beyond interesting. It's a little violent. Like, yeah.
Сказал Николай, да, я советский солдат, как трогательно. Товарищи, вы сейчас все как вот водители автобусов, в которых мы все сидим. И от вашего отношения к вашей работе зависит и ваша судьба, и наша судьба, судьба директора автопарка и вообще всех. И уверенность и надежность, о которой ты говоришь, Володя, это то, чего мы ждем, и то, что мы хотим слышать каждый день. Дай бог тебе здоровья, что ты туда ездишь, и в нас вселяешь эту уверенность и надежность. Даже если было это шапка закидательства поначалу, сейчас мы взяли себя в руки и ответственно подходим к рулению этим автобусом. Знаешь, так удивительно, я все время вспоминаю слова, которые я услышала в самом начале спецоперации от одного из самых-самых главных наших руководителей, когда я спросила, а что будет? Мы сейчас будем там, я не знаю, ковровые бомбардировки Киева или что вообще будет-то теперь? И этот человек мне сказал, я похож на человека, который готов укатывать Киево-Печорскую лавру. Я прям запомнила.
I just want to say, while watching this, I really get the sense, like, I know we've been watching other content where the Russian propagandist is saying that this is a war against the world. But I really do get from her speech this idea of, like, as you were mentioning before, this like Soviet Union war against the world that is continuing. But the reality is that, like, I would imagine, like, most people in the West, especially those who don't live in Europe, directly or or in a country that had like gas relations with Russia doesn't seem to think about Russia at all, I would imagine. Then the only reason why we're really thinking about Russia is because of this war in Ukraine. If this war in Ukraine was not happening,
I would think about you.
we would never ever think about them. I don't remember the last time I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on over there in Russia. Like, I would never...
The best parties and clothing and culture and
vodka and rap music. A state of liberal democracy. But this is just interesting how this idea of like, we are a victim of like the West where people don't think about you until you're invading Ukraine. Like, come on, guys. Let's tone it down a little bit, I guess.
Эти слова.
I think she's about to
Мы не
cry.
готовы
Oh, no.
и не будем. Это для нас святыня. Это мы, Киевская Русь. Это наша Киево-Печорская лавра. И то, что они творят, лишнее доказательство того, что они сами не считают, что это их. Для них, для самих это ничего не значит вообще.
Can we talk about, okay, so do you know what Kievan Rus is?
No.
So this was like a medieval state that existed around the year 1000 and then was destroyed by the Mongols. So it was based in Kiev, and like when it was conquered, its like former territory ended up being several states.
Okay.
And among them were like today's Ukraine, and then Belarus, and then Russia, which was around Moscow.
Okay.
And then one of the three, Moscow, started expanding like, really quickly and made it all the way to the Pacific, and eventually, was able to one way or another absorb Ukraine. And they kind of like, anyway, the argument that she's making is this whole like, Ukraine is the cradle of Russian civilization. And I'm like, wait a second, like, Ukraine's the cradle of Russian civilization? Why are we talking about Russia? Like, Ukraine's the cradle of Ukrainian civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just like it's a brilliant rhetorical strategy. Because you hear people say this unironically. Like, I've heard non-political context. Like, I've heard people say, well, the complex thing about Russian history is when you start learning Russian history, you really got to learn Ukrainian history because Ukraine's the cradle of Russian civilization. It's like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's a separate country.
Yeah.
Like, if Kievan Rus is the cradle of anyone's civilization, it's Ukraine. Yeah. I mean, is the United Kingdom the cradle of American civilization? I mean, it's such a disturbing and just profoundly, like, it's such a genocidal thing.
And once you say that, I can't imagine us being like starting a war with the UK to be like, even if in that context we were like, yes, crazily, the UK is like the mother of the US, right? And would it make sense for us to invade the UK when they're like a separate nation with a separate culture and who do things, who have like a government that's completely dissimilar to ours? It wouldn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense, people. I don't know.
Вообще. Ну и вообще, конечно, для верующего человека очевидно, что они просто бесы. И историю.
Yeah, because it's either, ours, it's either the cradle of Russian civilization or you don't care about it at all, right? That's her argument, Maybe Russians can have like a healthy relationship to Ukraine where it's like, it's a cool place that's important in our history too, and it's a separate country. Maybe like there's somewhere in between we need to conquer and annihilate it, and it doesn't matter at all. Is there some like happening in the middle?
So, they're a sovereign nation with their own people and their own culture, and that's none of our business. Like, I mean, that could be that. It could be that, but it's not. Yeah. It's obviously we're the ones who are the devils.
I don't know how the subtitles are already a devils.
Для верующего человека очевидно, что они просто бесы. И историю они не знают. Никакую. Вот хорошо бы комик Зеленский все бы это знал. Он, может быть, подумал бы дважды, но он же не знает ничего. Я сомневаюсь, что он в своей жизни книжку хоть одну читал. И он сейчас, это так поразительно, если Библию вспоминать. Он же действительно такой маленький египетский фараончик, который не отпускает в данном случае на.
It's very interesting for you to take the Jewish president of another country and open the Bible and say he's the Pharaoh in the biblical story. Okay. It's unimaginable. Oh my gosh.
I think it's just like, oh, anyone who thinks this has never read a book. Try reading. You know, it's like, help me out here. Help me understand this, because your state descends from another state or has some kind of link to another state. Therefore, it doesn't exist. Can there be two states? Yeah. If you look at the British Commonwealth, one of the rules for joining the British Commonwealth is you have to have a constitutional link to Britain, i.e. they colonized you. And it's like, nowhere is the argument ever made that they're really Britain.
Yeah. And it's also the fact that, like, this is before what the history she's talking about was before Russia was even a state, right? We're talking about like pre-statehoods of like in Europe. We're talking about during the time of kingdom. So like this is irrelevant information. It's, to me, it seems historically, I mean, it's relevant in like if you're like a museum, but like what does it have to do with the current modern world, the post-World War II world that we live in today?
I know a little bit of this. There's this guy, Andrew Snyder, on YouTube. He's like a history professor, and he's been really like active pro-Ukraine. He spoke at the UN, stuff like that. And he talks about like the history of Kievan Rus. And apparently like after Rus fell, there was this like hot slogan of like taking back all of Rus. And I was always like, why are all these groups called the All-Russian this and the All-Russian that? And there's also like in Ukraine, there's like the all-Ukrainian this and that. And I'm like, what is the deal with saying all? Can you just say like Russian? That's why. Because it's this idea of like all of Rus. You know, we've taken it all back, but it's a complete fantasy. Like Crimea was never part of the Kievan Rus. You know, Upper Manchuria and all these places they conquered out to the Pacific were never part of historical Rus. So even if you're trying to stick with this, like, you know, we got to get it all back idea, it's just a complete fantasy.
Yeah, it's the traditional fantasy, traditional everything fantasy.
В данном случае наш народ, православный народ, русский народ, насильно удерживает народ. Вот он такой фараончик, и его уже на наших глазах постигают все те самые 10 казней египетских, которые по Библии, по Пятикнижию постигли фараона. Значит, какая была первая казнь? Первая казнь была реки крови. Мы что, не видим реки крови? Вот они, реки крови. Какая еще была казнь? Казнь была гром, молнии и град. У меня такое ощущение, что это писали про нашу установку «Град». Что вот будет град, который истребит всех людей и всех животных, и не помню уже дословно, но даже поля с их растениями.
I'm having a hard time following this metaphor of like Ukraine being the pharaoh, but the rivers of so Russia is the Jewish and oppressed people in the Bible who are raining down a plague on the pharaoh. But it doesn't make any sense because you are the larger and technically more, prosperous nation. Well, I guess they got billionaire oligarchs. I don't know if their billionaire oligarchs outpace Ukraine's, if Ukraine has any. And so, like, I'm not understanding it. I'm having a hard time understanding this metaphor that she's talking about, because it's like, how dare you pretend like you're not the oppressor here? How dare you be like, oh, we're the poor, we're the ones being kept from leaving and being oppressed. We're the small group of people being oppressed here, and we have to use our military might as the plague of God to like have rivers of blood in the Ukraine. This is Satanism.
Oh my God. Okay, so I got this one question because like I don't read the news. I confess, I only really follow Ukraine and stuff on YouTube. But like, did we just see like a state channel like the CNN or Fox News of Russia like quoting the Bible about like fire and brimstone and rivers of blood? Is that what we just watched?
That's exactly what we just watched.
Is that what CNN and Fox News are like?
I don't know about CNN, but it's giving Newsmax for it's so interesting to me. I feel like I keep going back to this statement. It's just like, I did not have, before this propaganda, before going through this propaganda with Lily, I did not see Russia as a particularly religious society. And I don't really see Russia still don't see Russia as a religious society. So it's interesting to me, these biblical metaphors, these metaphors about Satan, these metaphors that are about like traditional, these ideas about traditional values that seem to go back into the Bible, this idea of like the unification of the world almost under Russia, to defeat the West. Because the other question I have is what happens when they take Ukraine? Because what they're implying,
they're just not stopping there.
Because it seems like there's a little bit of breadcrumbing us to the possible future of the world, which is not just to take Ukraine, but to destroy the satanic West. And so I wonder if the propagandists themselves are aware of what they're saying or what they're asking for.
Okay, thank you, Margarita RT.
Margarita is giving flamenco dancer.
This clip was actually released by like a real Russian embassy. Yeah, the Russian embassy in Spain actually released this clip. So this is like as official as it's gonna get.
So Putin saw it and he approved it.
This is Russia. Delicious cuisine.
Oh.
Beautiful women. Cheap gas. Rich history. World-famous literature. Unique architecture. Fertile soil. Cheap electricity and water.
Ooh.
Ballet. Cheap taxi and delivery.
Is it food delivery?
Traditional values. Christianity. No cancel culture. Hospitality. Vodka. Economy that can withstand thousands of sanctions. Time to move to Russia. Don't delay. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Oh my God. What did we just watch?
I don't want to go there. Because you know how much I love cancel culture.
So like, they do the whole like, we're all Christian and straight and presumably white, and they do all of that. Fine. Okay. What's all this about like cheap gas and electricity and our soil is fertile and like this is some powerful copium?
I would love to look at how much a Russian family makes in a month.
Okay, 60,000 per capita in the U.S.
Yeah.
26. That's higher than I thought.
That's way higher than I thought. Yeah. And even still, for us to look at these numbers and for me to look at this commercial in Russia, this commercial for moving to Russia, why would I, as even somebody who is living in Spain, why would I move to Russia?
The fertile soil and the cheap gas.
And the blonde children running in fields.
White women running in fields. You get your own field.
And these natural resources, do they not belong to like billionaire oligarchs that I have no access to?
I I don't get this whole, like, and it's such a big part of, like, the mythos when it shows, like, you know, Putin topless riding horses out, you know.
Sucking in his gut.
You know, it's like, you know, we and the grizzly bears, we're going to drink oil and conquer the West.
While being drunk off of vodka. But it's just...
But, look, in fairness, only Russia has natural resources.
Yeah.
It's not like Ukrainians got the most incredible, like, defamous black soil, you know, like, you know.
It's not like America or any other country in the world has its own natural resources that it trades in open markets anywhere. But it's just, I just don't, I want to be able to separate like Russian culture and Russian people from its government. And I don't want to discount, like, there are millions of people who live in Russia who some of them are probably love living there for other reasons beside the government, for their family, their culture. And I don't want to take anything away from people's traditions, but I also don't think that, like, I don't think that Russia understands that we don't care. That is back to my original point, is that no one in the world before this war in Ukraine was, like, besides the 30, 40 people online who really want to be Z, besides them, like, no one else in the world was thinking, oh, yeah, I would love to move to Russia one day. Like, nobody. So it's just like, I don't understand the point of this move to Russia video at all.
They don't even really allow immigration like the Western countries do. You can't just, like, apply for your green card. You got to make one of those Dear Vladimir videos, you know, like that Australian couple did.
And even still, doesn't Russia have a big anti-immigrant, like, history in the first place, where they don't allow people or let people... I was watching a Roman video where he was looking for an apartment a couple of years ago in Russia, and in many of the ads that he was reading about the apartments he was looking at, they were saying that they don't accept foreigners. So I can't imagine somebody from Spain who doesn't speak Russian and who may be a little bit duskier than your average Russian person moving to Russia. So where would they live? Where would they be able to access this beautiful electricity when nobody would rent to them, or they won't have a lot of options in rentals? It's just...
I mean, there is a lot of anti-immigration sentiment in Russia. There was the movement against illegal immigration, I think it was called, which was banned as extremist back in the day. Like, it wouldn't be today. Like, I don't think there's any, like, politics that's too extreme as long as it's patriotic. And, like, forget about, like, real diversity. Like, they were, like, up in arms about Russian-speaking immigration internally to Russia and to Moscow.
Wow. Maybe it's too woke for them, you know? All right. I also loved in that ad, there's no cancel culture, and it's just, like, a black person, an Asian person.
Oh, really? I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, it's like but where is this happening? I mean, I guess...
Well, like, cancel culture to them just means people of color, or just gay people. Like, you hear them use these words like cancel culture and this and that, but, like, what they're actually showing is just, like, people existing.
It's interesting. But I guess part of propaganda is redefining terms, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like democracy to Nazism?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else we got?
Yeah, I gotta stop looking at the screen.
То, что мы сейчас наблюдаем, это процесс, который происходит при любом крушении больших империй. Мы видим трагедию нынешнего года, не понимая, что это все началось в 91-м. Все, что происходит, абсолютно соответствует распаду великих империй, который был со времен античности. Неизбежная война между фрагментами распадающихся империй. Неизбежное втягивание в эту войну соседей. Неизбежное переформатирование всего пространства и системы международных отношений. Это просто неизбежность. Мы сейчас, на самом деле, платим страшную цену за предательство и глупость последних советских и первых российских вождей. Вот как мы выйдем из этой войны. Вот что очень важно. Мы вообще понимаем, какая страшная угроза нависла над нашей страной.
So when he says something about this is the fault of the previous Soviet leaders, is he trying to say that like Putin has put them into this war to correct something that was done badly in the past?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is more of this this crazy world of Putin, is that Lenin is this outsider who came and, disrupted Russia. Stalin's great, Peter the Great, fantastic, and Gorbachev. I mean, you want to know how, he didn't even go to Gorbachev's funeral. A previous head of state. I don't think any senior Russian officials were there, but certainly not Putin. So in his view, the big problem in the world is that the USSR fell and Gorbachev let it happen. They should have, I don't know, killed everyone and held the whole empire together. That's absolutely what he's saying here. Wow. Because this is the narrative, right? Gorbachev was this, weak leader, and it took strongman Putin to, put it all back together. And we're suffering from the consequences of, Gorbachev letting the Soviet Union fall apart.
Oh, okay. This is where the through line with the Soviet Union comes in. Okay. Now,
yeah, because to him, the Soviet Union is good. To him, that's a manifestation of Russian empire and goodness, and, they recently closed Memorial in Russia, which is this human rights group that had, cataloged millions of names of people who had been killed, right, during the Great Purge and after in the Soviet Union. This is something like, Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial. But unlike in Israel, where there isn't a foreign diplomat in the world who hasn't visited Yad Vashem, who's been to Israel anyway, they just closed Memorial. This is a place that was talking about, remembering people who were, murdered by Stalin and by the Soviet government. It was just shut down last week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Если кто-то в элитах считает, что можно отскочить и жизнь будет прежней, они, значит, так и не поняли ничего. От слова «совсем». Вот просто совсем.
Мы
действительно, как мне кажется, то, что мы живем в период бурного продвижения истории к очередному этапу некой стабилизации мирового сообщества, нашей человеческой цивилизации, это очевидно. Великие державы европейские рушатся. Кстати, в этом смысле, на мой взгляд, через 20 лет, 30 лет карта Европы будет совсем другая. Совсем другая.
So this is where the collapse of the West propaganda comes from.
Исчезают великие европейские державы. Все. Остались только две. Турция, Османская империя и Россия. Вот всего две великих европейских державы остались. А были Великобритания, Франция, Германия, Италия, когда-то еще Голландия и прочее. Вопрос, который часто, Владимир Анатольевич, вы задаете. Как там немцы, вся немецкая нация, великая культура, литература, при Гитлере превратилась в нацистов, расистов и так далее. А вот мы видим, как, вы тоже несколько преувеличиваете, на мой взгляд, значение этой украинской нации. Допустим, вот как она превратилась, во всяком случае, то, что мы видим, и от людей обычных, и тем более от верхушки, в буквальном смысле в животных. Нужно все это описать, проанализировать, тем более, что это дает, естественно, отцвет на то, как будут развиваться события дальше.
He said that, and I don't even think that he honestly believed that it came out of his mouth. He literally had to, force himself to say it and then go like this, because of how freaking disgusting that actually was for him to say something like that.
Here's my question. Can we stop pretending that this is about anything other than Russia's intense hatred of Ukraine and intense racism against Ukrainians. I mean, talking about something that is like the very definition of genocidal racism would be comparing someone to animals. I mean, to African Americans, to Jews. I mean, I cannot think of like a better sign of we mean no good than comparing someone like that. And this is on state TV. This is on the show of the #1 Russian, news show. It goes for multiple hours every night in Russia. It's the most watched show. I mean, that is some incredibly disturbing stuff.
And for him to have previously implied during that speech that like this thing that they're doing is an effort to restabilize humanity, that this destabilization is them trying to stabilize the West and make the West great again by calling a group of people animals and destroying their homeland, is just to me like shockingly unfathomable. I don't know what to say. I think this is the worst one we've seen today.
Yeah, it feels wrong to even make jokes right now. Okay, so this would not be an episode about Russian propaganda if we didn't talk about the biggest whopper of them all, that Russia is invading Ukraine to denazify it. I mean, at first I didn't want to touch this one just because it's so upsetting and unhinged, but I feel like we should just touch on it at least a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. How do you start with this one?
I feel like this is one of their most delusional pieces of propaganda because Zelensky is literally a Jewish man. And so I don't understand why they wouldn't just let Zelensky, a Jewish person, run the country. And that would, if there were Nazis, that would just denazify it. And
I'll tell you why.
Tell me.
Because to them, being Ukrainian is Nazism.
Wow.
Right? Because, well, I think there's a couple of dimensions. For one, like, Russia is a far-right regime today. I mean, I think I'm, like, allowed to say that, right? They're not hiding it anymore. This is definitely an extreme right ultranationalist regime. So I think, this kind of, like, psychological compensation, projecting it onto your adversary and saying, oh, we're fighting the extreme right. I mean, I think that's basically why they're doing it. But it is so troubling to me. I am like ethnically Jewish, I guess. And like Russia recently banned the Jewish Agency. This is the group that like facilitates people moving to Israel if they want. And after the end of the Soviet Union, the Jewish Agency was able to operate openly there, and a lot of people moved to Israel who wanted to. And this is like a seismic shift in Jewish-Russian relations, the banning of the Jewish Agency. The chief rabbi of Moscow just left the country and said, get out while you can, because anytime things go wrong in Russian history, Jews get scapegoated. So I don't want to be like alarmist. That's not happening yet. Some of the top oligarchs like Abramovich are Jewish, so it's not necessarily the easiest thing to pull off at the moment, but it's a concerning moment for sure. It's a very concerning and unstable moment for Jewish Russians. And for them to be projecting this message is so, this just takes us back to the anti-Jewish repressions under Brezhnev and under Khrushchev. During the Soviet anti-Jewish repressions, they would also do the same thing. Like they would say, oh, we're fighting fascism. We're fighting Zionist fascists and this kind of language. And they had museums against like Zionist imperialism. And some of the objects of Zionist imperialism were like kippahs and taluses, and just like common Jewish items were identified with the extreme right and with fascism. And they did this all throughout the Soviet period. They always had this narrative that Nazi elements ended up in the West. So that's the thing, like you can't even give him credit for coming up with all this on his own. Like this is a continuation of Soviet anti-Western propaganda.
Yeah. And I think like it's also back to that question, I think, of like, if they're saying they're denazifying Ukraine, what's the next step? Denazifying Germany, denazifying the US?
It's not like they even showed us any Nazi elements. They're just like, oh, the government's Nazis. Ukraine's Nazi. It's like, next the guy doesn't like apples. And like, oh, apples are Nazis, you know?
And it's just like these talking points are just, a lot of them are nonsensical, and they're like very circular. They're very like, everyone else is a Nazi, everyone else is not of God, everyone else is Satanist, everyone, it's like we were talking about earlier, it seems like Putin is trying to hit every conspiracy theory in the world in order to justify this war. And it's offensive to people's intelligence, because most of us can see right through it, but it's also dangerous to the people of Ukraine because they're losing like access to their homes
and their lives
because of this like ridiculous vendetta that he has.
So we've watched a lot of propaganda. I've had enough. I can't take it anymore. I think we get the picture. The West is Satanist and, you know,
full of Nazis.
Yeah, and you're supposed to be a good Orthodox Russian Christian, and okay, we get it. So we understand now after watching all of that, this kind of Russian worldview, at least that they're promoting. Who knows how many people actually buy it. Now what? Right? This state exists. They have thousands of nuclear weapons. They've put out strategic documents that describe the West as an existential threat to them. So now what? Like, we don't have to like it. The state exists. North Korea exists. The question is, how are we in the West? How are we as Americans? How are we supposed to relate to Russia now?
That is a great question. And I'm not entirely sure. Because as I've said before this war, Russia was not something that I think most Americans thought about besides like the 2016 election, like, you know, the misinformation and disinformation campaigns. And to be honest, like, it's not really something that we think about besides in the context of the war. And I think that maybe this war is also them trying to get the attention. I feel like they've always had the attention of the U.S. government, but maybe the attention of the American people.
I think they want their status in the world back.
Yeah.
Like, this is so driven by nostalgia.
Yes. And like before the wall fell down type of thing, where we were all scared. We had a red scare, as it were. But I think it's going to be hard to convince people to do that with the internet being a thing, right? Just as much as of disinformation there is out there, there is like good information out there. There are historians making videos. There's Lily making videos to support Ukraine.
Thank you.
And there's
Chris making videos.
and also it's so easy to reach out to people across the world now. It's not just that like, oh, this war in Ukraine is happening to people on the other side of the world. Like, I bought this dress from a Ukrainian small business in Ukraine, right? And the woman who makes the dress, who knitted the dress, and I have had conversations together. Like, this feels more real to me. And I don't think, and because the Russian people themselves are isolated right now because of the war, and even before the war, right? It's so, like, I've followed people who live in Russia on social media, like, and now that the war has started, it's become even harder to get access to those people. But we do have access to Ukrainians, and we do have a way to relate to them. I think that's also ultimately going to feed into one of the reasons why they lose the war, because of their superiority complex, because of their like they're victimizing themselves. And it's hard to see somebody as a victim that you've never really thought about, and they present themselves to you as a victim. And ultimately, I don't think this is going to work. But it's very important that we don't continue to lose people in this war, and that our governments take this war very seriously.
I think for my part, this is just so terrifying, the ideology they're putting forward. You know, can we get the communists back, anyone? I don't see any possibility that the West and the US can have anything approaching a normal relationship with them, and that's troubling. I mean, like, we have better relationships with some communist country like Vietnam. We have quite a good relationship with. I hate to put it, I hate to say this, but I think this is the start of a second Cold War. I think it started the day that they, launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In terms of, how can we relate to a state with this kind of ideology? Well, I think, St. Javelin here is my first, the first way we should relate to them. I mean, I think we got to stop them. I think people always ask me this, well, how much resources? And it's like, there's no limit. Like, what would you use to defend any democratic country? In my opinion, from Taiwan and South Korea, through the US, through Europe, and, ending all the way on the border in Ukraine, these are free countries. These are democratic countries. These are countries with human rights that follow international law, ideally at least. And I think we have to, a country that's projecting this kind of this imperial ideology, can anyone seriously say that they're going to stop in Ukraine?
No, they're not. They're saying they don't plan to.
You see this in Russian TV. Oh, are there more countries that need denazification? It's scary stuff. And
at one point in one of the videos, she says the German people used to be free, and I'm like, those are also breadcrumbing ideas to be to make the Russian people accept not only this war in Ukraine, but what is it, 20 years of fighting the rest of Europe, sending their sons to the front lines, boys who don't want to fight wars. This is we are trying, I feel not to get all humanist, but we're trying as all humans on this planet. A lot of us are trying to move away from this type of world. We, especially those of us in the younger generations, right? We're trying to move away from this world where you just get into wars for whatever reason. We don't want more conservative leaning people and more left leaning people don't want to send any member in our family into a war. For what? And I don't think that Russian people also want to keep sending their sons into a war that they seem to be losing. So hopefully, I think I'm being super hopeful here and saying that I hope the war ends soon, but I have a feeling that Russia is not going to take these defeats lying down.
Okay, thanks for making it this far. You've probably watched too much Russian propaganda today. I know I have for sure.
So have I.
Kind of want to wrap up just by saying, this stuff is absolutely terrifying. The depth of the racism and the imperial ideology. Having music videos with nuclear weapons taking off. This is some of the scariest stuff I've ever seen. This is stuff that we expect really from North Korea, I think. Thank you, Ukrainian soldiers, and people supporting Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian government and all the incredible work you're doing. I know the West is supporting Ukraine. In my view, we could do a lot more, and I think we're trying to do our part, but I don't see any possibility for compromise with a regime like this. I think Russia needs to be forced out of Ukraine entirely, one way or the other, and then, unfortunately, if there's going to be a new Cold War, at least it can be as safe and secure boundaries.
Yes.
What's going on right now and this kind of hybrid warfare, and we're going to mess up the boundaries of your state like they did to Georgia too. I don't think we could take this lying down anymore. And I'm so impressed, right? I'm so inspired by Ukraine. I don't think there were many people in the U.S., I was not among them, who ever thought that Ukraine would be as effective on the battlefield, as brave, And it's really something to watch. You've inspired me personally so much, and I know millions and tens of millions of people around the world. So until next time, until next episode of Salute Ukraine, glory to the heroes and glory to Ukraine. Bye-bye.